he's going to be fired now after 10 games as we had a shakeup in the Windy City. Shane Waldron is officially out as the offensive coordinator. Bears sending him home, promoting Thomas Brown, the passing game coordinator, who was also an offensive coordinator for the Panthers last year, up to fill in the duties as play caller and OC. This comes in midst of an absolutely egregious 3-game stretch it was basically since that Hail Mary loss to Washington, where they have been absolutely abysmal offensively, defensive teams, special teams, and coaching. But Shane Waldron's kind of been, we'll say, maligned a little bit throughout the entire season. A lot of the personnels, the play calling, even going back to his days in Seattle with JSN's infamous, are we live? Oh, what? Shane Waldron's a great guy when they asked him about it, to the point of he's been much maligned. So it's a shakeup in Chicago. So I've talked enough about it. I'll let you go in first, Kelsey. Did Shane deserve to get the axe? Was this the right move?
I don't think he was the only one that deserves to get the axe, but absolutely,
Right.
I think you can't perform this way in the NFL. And it might prove that it's not just Shane Waldron when this all shakes out. I don't know if it is. I do think there's a lot of pieces in this Chicago puzzle that weren't going to work anyways. And I think this is a situation where Shane Waldron's the let's make an example out of somebody guy. And it sucks, but at the same time, if you ask Bears fans, they're like, "Oh yeah, you guys he's been ruining a potential Hall of Fame quarterback." And while Caleb has been impressive at times this year, he also looks like a rookie this year. So how you're getting Hall of Fame out of a rookie, I'll never figure it out because I refuse to, at this point, give any rookies. No offense to any of the rookies because there are a lot of studs, and we'll get to those later in the program. But there are a lot of good rookies this year, and Caleb's kind of average as far as rookies go, at least overall throughout the season. Yes, he started out like a gangbuster, but it almost felt like for the Bears offense, especially the last 3 weeks, that script, man, must have been 50 plays, 60 plays long because it felt like they never got out of it and got into what might actually work. And I say that because there's been a lot of conversation to have it afterwards, including DJ Moore stepping up to the stands earlier today. And basically, as he politely put it, we don't really don't make it on time. It's usually a drive late. It's we wait till halftime to make our first adjustment. That's like embarrassing to hear in the NFL. And we've talked about how important it is for coaches once they get through the script, the first 15, to be able to make an adjustment on the fly, and how important that is for the future of your team. If that's true, is it an Eberflus downs conversation, or is it just Shane Waldron and that's his philosophy? I don't know. Now, this is the second stop we've had that conversation about this offensive coordinator in particular. So very interesting to see what's going forward. I do like the idea of bringing Thomas Brown in, but I don't. He's saying the right things. I can't really judge him on 1 year in Carolina. It feels mean. Feels like trying to judge Trevor Lawrence for Urban Meyer as coach for 1 year. I don't want to do that to a guy yet. I want to give him some time, but we'll see how that goes. But there are far, far too many weapons in that Bears offense to be this bad offensively. And these wide receivers, why they were being used as blocking wide receivers at times, I will never understand. So that's a play calling issue, hands down, and that needed to be addressed. But I don't know if Waldron was the only one responsible for those play calling issues, if that makes sense.
I love that you said that because that gives me the chance to pivot and yell about all the things I was ready to yell about. But I do agree, Shane Waldron wasn't the right guy in the first place, and we kind of talked about this a little bit. The issue goes further back to, all right, at the end of last year, you already know you're going to shake things up. You have the number 1 overall pick without being the worst team in the league. That's kind of good for you. You got a Pro Bowl receiver out of that trade, and you have 2 top 10 picks. You know you're going to shake things up a little bit. By the love of all that is holy and all that you hold dear, you can't keep Matt Eberflus as the coach in that point. You were 1-6 to start last year, got a little lukewarm down the stretch, beating teams with backup quarterbacks and the Lions. That was the one good win stretch.
Yeah.
Justin Fields played efficiently well. Like, he played well down the stretch. Not good, not great, like what we saw at the Steelers. You knew you were going to take a shot at one of these quarterbacks. We all knew it was going to be Caleb because we talk about the upside. The upside is clear if he can make it count. You can't do the lame duck coach situation you've done twice already. You did it with Mitch Trubisky, and I think it was John Fox. Axed him after the rookie year, brought in Matt Nagy and a whole new staff. You did it with Justin Fields, axed Matt Nagy and the whole new staff. You can't do it with Eberflus again, and you just did it again. Are you going to really keep him? And if you plan on keeping him, let's just go through the numbers. 14-29 career record so far. 3rd offensive staff hired. Franchise record 14-game losing streak. 8 assistants fired in the last 14 months. 0-8 in Sunday away games. 0-18, excuse me, 0-18. Has yet to win a regular 1:00 Sunday away game. In division,
Wow.
I think you got 5 wins in 3 years, if that. I might be being generous. 0 against your vaunted Packers. Packers rival too. That's like if the Cowboys went 3 years without beating the Eagles, the Giants, or the Commanders. They just happen to have 3 rivals, so
We're
that's
we're we're far we're not far away from that possibility, but keep going, keep going. I
They
imagine
they
there's
beat the
more.
Giants this year, they got that going, and they smoked the Commanders twice last year and split with the Eagles. But my point being, those are some egregious numbers. Well, you shouldn't have brought him back in the first place because you're in that weird
Yeah.
lame duck situation again. So, and then you bring in another offensive coordinator who, for the love of goodness, you saw it in Seattle while there was some success with Geno not riding back. As a 32-year-old quarterback who has basically made the round so he can, at that point, he's ready to handle himself. It's just a more stable overall situation when Pete Carroll was the head coach. As we kind of see that they messed up to begin with, especially when Ben Johnson has said that he was interested in the job. Maybe he wasn't going to come there. We get it. Bill Belichick was out there for you didn't even really try for that. You left that on the table. Maybe he brings in Josh McDaniels, worst head coach ever, but legit offensive coordinator under Bill Belichick. Would it have happened?
Yeah.
I don't know. Jim Harbaugh, Bears alum, was interested in the opportunity. Look what he has done in Los Angeles. That roster is almost the same, maybe even worse when you look at the receiving core.
Yeah.
I'm going to trade that off with Joe Alt delete. So we'll say rosters and
The
equivalent.
offensive line, yeah, offensive line in Chicago worse than Chargers
Exactly.
for sure.
And you put Jim Harbaugh in there, I guarantee that that offensive line is better, which is the biggest thing they did not address at all. They signed a free agent, Nate Davis, last year, who just got cut today. In the middle of a 3-year, $30 million contract, they just cut him today, as if you had offensive line depth to be getting rid of guys in the first place. You took a receiver at pick number 9, and we both love Roma Dunze. This is a Roma Dunze stan account. There's no problem with that pick. But you just traded a 4th-round pick to get Keenan Allen. So you're loading up on receivers so that they can watch Caleb Williams get sacked, especially when you already knew he had a propensity for holding the ball. So you want to do things to help him out in the first place. Build that offensive line, call the screens, call those quick hitters, do stuff to get him in rhythm. You have to treat him like Andy Reid did with early Patrick Mahomes. Not comparing the two, but make the read for him basically with the play call. Here's what you do. That safety goes there, you hit here. You throw picks, we don't care. But you let that ball rip. You're going to be like the Bruce Arians mantra of let it rip. If you throw a pick, we're going to throw it 30 yards down the field so it's an arm punt. Like you can't have him. He looks hesitant. He looks, I don't want to say neutered, but he looks like what Justin Fields was in the early part of last year. When you have a conservative head coach saying, hey, don't turn the ball over, just don't. He ends up taking sacks because you're taking away what they do best. And it's been a solid field. You see it with the dynamic quarterbacks. You tell them don't be dynamic because we don't want you to turn the ball over. Then they end up looking like 50-year-old Joe Flacco. It does not work. So that's my issues with the head coach. He shouldn't have been. They needed to shake this up properly last offseason. So now we're in the lame duck situation again, and they basically can't miss this offseason. Luckily, though, they got that extra second-round pick from Carolina, so they have some assets to build with. So which stinks because the GM has made incredible trades like that to get DJ Moore, all these extra picks, the opportunity to get Caleb. But then there's also the trade to get Montez Sweat, who's outstanding. And then you factor in the fact that he traded in the 32nd overall pick for Chase Claypool. And then he brought back Matt Eberflus and the free agent signings. DeAndre Swift was the first free agent signed of this offseason. DeAndre Swift's good. No problem here, but where's he supposed to go? Like, what hole is he supposed to run to when he's already been known as a running back who, when the O-line's good, he's good. Not saying he's bad without it, but he's not someone that could look this way and then find a hole over here instantly. He's not like one of those. He doesn't have like that freakish vision that you'd almost see from like a Le'Veon Bell and some of those guys that if there's nothing there, he somehow finds it. He's just a good player. But where's he supposed to go when no one can block? And you have no depth. You have an injury-prone offensive. There's a lot of issues. Shane Waldron did have to go, but we're not going to spend too much time. This is not the Chicago Bears 101 forecast. But I will say they need to do some shakeup on January 7th or whenever the season ends. It's not done.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that free agent conversation for a second, though. You mentioned DeAndre Swift as the number one free agent signed, period, across the league. Number one free agent.
Saquon Barkley was there. I'm saying
sorry, Saquon.
Sorry, he's the first one to do pen to paper. I misworded that. My apologies.
Yeah,
he's the
first one to pen to paper. Meaning there was still an opportunity to go get Saquon.
Lucky for Saquon, they did.
Yeah, I just the thought that look, I think Ryan Poles has done a good job with getting this Bears roster somewhat rebuilt, but I think there were opportunities to, instead of looking at best player for Eberflus, you should just look at best player to make Caleb successful, because you already knew you were going to get Caleb
You knew that in
going into free
January.
agency. Yeah,
You knew that as soon as the season ended.
heck, wasn't it December that they locked up the number 1 overall pick, if I'm not mistaken?
I think it was like week 16. So like in the last
Yeah.
2 weeks, you already knew.
So you have 2 weeks to plan your first move in the offseason, and it was to let some assistants go. And this is another piece of this that I need to say that I don't think people look at. If 1 or 2 assistants disappear and get fired off of staff, that's the assistant's problem. If, how many did you say, 8 assistants are fired under his tenure?
14 months have either left or were fired, including the entire
8.
offensive staff last year when the season ended, but not the defensive staff, just the offensive staff, not the coaching, not the other, no one else.
8 assistants. The fact that people, first of all, there's 4 assistants per team, 4 real assistants per team. Then you have the assistants to the assistants after that. There are 4 real assistants per season on the team. He lost 2 full assistant crews, not at the same time, obviously, in his 14 months. That means there's a head coaching problem. That means the man at the top of that tower needs to go at some point in time. When you're starting to lose more than 4, you have to have there's a red flag. Like, there's no beige flags, there's no green flags, there's no light tan flags you're throwing up here. This is full on red emergency skull and crossbones flag that should go up. That you just need to have that conversation with Eberflus. Like, sorry, man, this isn't working out. You got to go. And when you sit there and then spend your first 8 weeks in the offseason planning to get DeAndre Swift, and not one of the 7 offensive linemen that you could have possibly picked up that would have been an improvement over a hurt second-year player who's only played 2 games in the NFL, and 3 offensive linemen who are just best described as journeymen, and Nate Jones. How do you think DeAndre Swift is going to work in that? DeAndre Swift has always had the same problem. As you mentioned, he's not an elite vision guy. I will also go in to say he's a better receiving running back than he is a running back, which seems crazy to say, but when he doesn't have an offensive line, you saw it at Georgia. When he had a top-tier offensive line, the dude tore it up. When you put him behind an offensive line in the NFL, that was at times, he couldn't do anything. With Philadelphia, he was meh at best last season.
Started, man. He got strong down the stretch.
Strong.
He got behind Jason Kelsey. He just couldn't get in the end zone because
once they got healthy, though. But that's the thing, is once they got healthy again on the offensive line, he was able to excel. So while Poles has done a good job, it has not been the rebuild needed job that, let's say, a team like the Jets were doing before it all fell off the wagon when Aaron Rodgers came into town. And it's worth mentioning that GMs need to be held accountable first, but head coaches need to be second. And then the assistants should be held accountable. Unless there's just a blatantly offensive thing that the assistants are doing, the assistants all report to the head coach. The head coach reports all of that to the GM in a well-structured organization. Alternate scenario being Bill Belichick is head coach / GM. That's the alternate scenario in that situation. But it's worth talking about that. You need to have that conversation if you're Ryan Poles, like, hey, man, you're not getting the job done. Your staff is not getting the job done. We can't keep getting rid of staff if it's not going to get the job done. So figure it out. You get 4 firings throughout your 14 years, and 14 months, and if that doesn't work, you're out too. I mean, that's. And I hate the idea that there's high turnover in the league, but when it's not working, when you're trying to rebuild a franchise, and especially a franchise like the Bears, where they're just dying for somebody to come in and save them, they are hoping and praying for it. And you have opportunities to go get a better coach across the board, whether it be head coach, assistant, or somewhere in between, OC, DC, any one of those positions, and you're going to stick with Matt Eberflus, who, again, Matt Eberflus might be a great guy, but he is a terrible head coach of the Chicago Bears right now. And I don't think, and there's any arguing that. And if anybody thinks differently, I welcome you to come on the show and explain it to me, because right now, 14 months of evidence says otherwise. And it's tough, but it is what it is. Like, I feel like this is the situation where Bears fans need to take a strong look at themselves and be like, maybe we should have conversations with our ownership at this point, because something's not working, and it's not just assistants at this point. It's not the quarterback. If anybody thinks Justin Fields in a second year would have been any worse than what we're seeing from Caleb right now, you're blind. But that's not the point either. It's just there are so many things going wrong with this system, and it starts with GM Ryan Poles and it goes to Eberflus second. And until you fix those two things, this is going to continue. And you have to fix them either before the offseason starts so you can have plenty of time to look for a replacement, or as soon as the offseason starts, clean house, because this is ridiculous with Chicago.
Frankly, unless they somehow run the table and make a playoff run down this stretch where they win like 6 of their next 7 or something like that and somehow squeak in there, because that includes the entire NFC North schedule, which would mean you're going like 5-1 in division. Unless you pull that off. Maybe this was like the random spark like when the Ravens did it in their Super Bowl year when they brought in Jim Caldwell to be the OC. Unless this happens, it's time to clean house. Everybody's got to go at that point. Like they got top to bottom, it's got to be clean.
It feels like even if they do that, you're just kicking the can down the road. You're just going to deal with it next year, is what it feels like. I don't know. I feel like this point, your time. If you're the Bears, you're and especially like I have a sympathy for Bears fans right now. I don't normally have here, but I think at this point, it's tough to continue looking at this franchise and keep giving these fans hope if you're just going to keep rolling out the same top of the pyramid every single year. It has to change. It has to something has to happen. You know, I love the title for this topic is shake up in Chicago, because there needs to be a shake up. Somebody needs to go flip the bean in Chicago or something. Whatever they need to do, it's just something needs to be fixed here. It's ridiculous.